For decades, scientific consensus has held that the deep ocean is an environment defined by its lack of oxygen, a vast and lightless world where life survives on chemical energy. But a recent and controversial paper in Nature Geoscience challenges this long-held view. A team of researchers reported the discovery of dark oxygen being produced in the abyss. The scientists hypothesized that polymetallic nodules may be acting as natural batteries, splitting seawater and producing oxygen. If these findings are validated, they would fundamentally alter our understanding of the deep ocean's chemistry and the global oxygen cycle. But the data has been met with considerable skepticism, both from independent scientists and the deep-sea mining companies that funded the research. This debate arrives at a critical juncture as the world stands on the verge of launching billion-dollar industrial operations to mine these very same nodules before we can fully understand their role in the marine ecosystem. Our perception of the deep ocean has evolved dramatically throughout history, from a feared and unknown abyss to a place of wonder and scientific fascination. In 1843, the azoic hypothesis dominated scientific thought. This idea suggested that below depths of 230 fathoms, immense pressure, lack of sunlight, and frigid temperatures would make it impossible for life to survive at the bottom of the ocean. Yet, as with so many scientific beliefs, this hypothesis was eventually dismantled by discovery. In 1850, Michael Sars dredged the Norwegian seas and found a rich ecosystem of coral and previously undiscovered species at 300 fathoms. Then, in the 1870s, the Challenger expedition disproved the hypothesis forever by discovering thousands of new species uniquely adapted to life near the seafloor. Finally, in 1977, the discovery of hydrothermal vents completely revolutionized our understanding, revealing thriving ecosystems that existed entirely on chemical energy in a process known as chemosynthesis. These discoveries have continuously reshaped our view of the ocean floor, transforming it from a supposed wasteland into the largest habitat on the planet, teeming with diverse and unique life. Now, we stand at another pivotal moment. This 2024 paper and the scientific debate it has sparked once again challenges our fundamental assumptions about the deep sea. The study suggests that the polymetallic nodules that litter the seafloor might be acting as geo-batteries, generating a form of dark oxygen. This discovery, if proven to be true, would not only add another surprising chapter to the history of deep-sea exploration, but also introduce a new layer to our understanding of how life is sustained in the deepest parts of our oceans. The discoveries challenged the long-established assumption that photosynthesis, which began approximately 2.7 billion years ago, was the sole catalyst for oxygen production on Earth, sparking an intense scientific debate about the origins of life itself. Dark oxygen is the production of oxygen that does not rely on sunlight and photosynthesis. This is different from how the term dark is used in phrases like biological dark matter, where simply it means something that is not well understood. Instead, in this case, it refers to a process that can occur in the absence of light. While most of the Earth's oxygen comes from plants and other organisms through photosynthesis, dark oxygen can be generated through various natural processes, both biological and non-biological. This type of oxygen is crucial because it can support life in environments that are completely dark and may lack other sources of oxygen. Polymetallic nodules are one of the most remarkable features of the abyssal plain. Their existence has been a curiosity of oceanographers for over a century, first being documented in 1868. They were described at the time as black-looking spherical lumps found in great numbers and often of a large size. These formations, also known as manganese nodules, are found in most oceans, but the densest and most economically significant deposits are in the Clarion-Clipperton Zone. The nodules themselves are formed through an extremely slow process of precipitation and aggregation of metal hydroxides around a central core, which could be a shark tooth or a small piece of rock. The CCZ nodules, in particular, are formed from a combination of precipitation directly from seawater and diagenetic processes in which metals are precipitated from the interstitial water of the sediments. This process can take millions of years, with growth rates as slow as a few millimeters per million years, which makes these polymetallic nodules one of the slowest growing geological features on Earth. Their importance to the ecosystem is not yet fully understood, but the researchers suggest that the dark oxygen produced by the nodules may be a vital source of oxygen for the benthic organisms that live on or near the seafloor, providing the essential element needed for aerobic respiration. The CCZ, with its vast field of polymetallic nodules, is the target of a growing industry. Companies are racing to develop technology to harvest these nodules, which are rich in the metals needed for batteries, electronics, electric vehicles, and other green technologies. But the proposed mining methods are undeniably destructive. Large tractor-like robots are designed to crawl across the seafloor, scooping up the top layer of sediment and nodules. This process would not only remove the nodules themselves, but also stir up massive plumes of sediment that could travel for miles, suffocating the delicate organisms that live there. The dark oxygen discoveries suggest that deep-sea mining would be destroying unknown habitats and a vital oxygen source for the entire ecosystem. The act of removing the nodules and disrupting the sediment could eliminate the geo-battery that sustains life we haven't even begun to understand yet. To understand the significance of the research claims, it's essential to first understand the context in which it was made. Scientists embark on a series of expeditions to the Nauru Ocean Resources D license area in the Clarion-Clipperton Zone, a vast expanse in the Pacific Ocean known for its dense fields of polymetallic nodules. Their mission was routine: to measure sediment community oxygen consumption, SCOC, which is the rate at which marine organisms on the seafloor use up oxygen for respiration. This is a foundational measurement in deep-sea ecology as it helps determine the metabolic health and biomass of the ecosystem. To do this, they deployed a specialized piece of equipment called a benthic chamber lander. This autonomous device descends to the abyssal depths where its 3 square chambers, each 484 square centimeters, push into the sediment, creating a sealed microcosm of the seafloor. Oxygen levels inside these chambers are then continuously monitored. The experiments were conducted over several cruises in 2021 and 2022, with the team testing different conditions by injecting solutions of dead algae biomass, dissolved inorganic carbon, and ammonium into the chambers in order to simulate various environmental scenarios. Oxygen levels inside the chambers were monitored continuously every 10 seconds using highly calibrated sensors called optodes. The results, however, were anything but routine. Instead of observing a decrease in oxygen, a process that's well documented in deep-sea studies, the researchers found something completely unexpected. In 25 separate incubations, oxygen concentrations soared, in some cases to more than 3 times the background concentration. Based on the measurements from the paper, this meant there was a net oxygen production rate of 1.7 to 18 millimoles of oxygen per square meter per day. This finding directly contradicted the established scientific consensus that the deep sea floor is an oxygen sink. This phenomenon was so unexpected and contrary to existing knowledge that the researchers, led by marine ecologist Andrew Sweetman, initially feared that their equipment was faulty. To rule out every potential experimental error, they took a number of exhaustive steps. They first confirmed the optode readings with independent measurements using the well-established Winkler method, which chemically titrates dissolved oxygen. This confirmed that the sensors were indeed providing accurate data. They also verified that the oxygen increase was not due to the injected treatments or to trapped air bubbles, a common concern in deep-sea experiments. To eliminate the possibility that the lander was somehow pulling oxygen-rich water from a hidden source below the sediment, they conducted exit incubations on deck, which also showed oxygen production. So, something on the abyssal seafloor was generating oxygen in the complete absence of sunlight. They called this process dark oxygen production. While the idea of oxygen being produced in the dark may seem extraordinary, it's important to clarify that other forms of dark oxygen production have been previously documented. These processes, however, differ significantly from the one now being debated. For example, abiotic dark oxygen can be generated through water radiolysis, where the radioactive decay of elements like uranium or thorium in geological environments such as aquifers and deep geological repositories splits water molecules into oxygen and hydrogen. Additionally, certain microorganisms are capable of biotic dark oxygen production. These microbes use a variety of processes such as chlorite dismutation and nitric oxide dismutation to generate oxygen in environments that are anoxic. These known sources of dark oxygen are typically found in isolated, specialized niches and are not part of the vast open ocean ecosystem. This is what makes the claim of polymetallic nodules producing dark oxygen in the deep sea so revolutionary. it suggests a potentially widespread and previously unknown mechanism for oxygen generation in the largest habitat on our planet. With experimental artifacts seemingly ruled out, the team turned their attention to the fundamental question of why. They first considered biological mechanisms, but this was quickly dismissed, because they ran experiments with a poison, mercury chloride, to inhibit microbial activity and still observed oxygen production. While some microbes in the CCZ are known to resist mercury poisoning, the specific taxa known to produce dark oxygen are killed by the addition of the poison. Also, the amount of oxygen produced was too high to be accounted for by any resistant organisms alone. This strongly suggested that a non-biological process was at play. The team next investigated two potential abiotic sources, radiolysis and chemical dissolution. Radiolysis is the splitting of water molecules by natural radiation from radioactive isotopes present in the nodules and in the sediments. The researchers used a kinetic model to estimate that this process could only produce about 0.18 micromoles of oxygen per liter over 48 hours, a negligible amount compared to what was measured. Similarly, they modeled the chemical reduction of manganese oxide, a primary component of the nodules, to see if it could liberate oxygen. This model, however, showed that this reaction would release less than 0.1 nanomoles of oxygen, again a tiny fraction of the observed production. These findings led them to abandon both hypotheses as viable explanations for the amount of dark oxygen being generated. The team's most compelling evidence that the nodules themselves were producing the oxygen came from a strong correlation between the amount of dark oxygen produced and the average surface area of the nodules. The larger the total surface area of the nodules, the more oxygen produced, pointing to a direct link between the nodules and the phenomenon. This led to the team's primary hypothesis. The polymetallic nodules are acting as a geo-battery. A nodule is a complex, layered structure rich in manganese, iron, nickel, copper, and cobalt. The researchers hypothesized that the different chemical compositions of these layers create an electrical potential difference, essentially a voltage, across the nodule's surface. Like a battery, where the chemical difference between the anode and the cathode generates a voltage that drives a current. To test this theory, the scientists took 12 nodules from the CCZ and measured the electrical potential between two platinum electrodes placed at 153 different sites on their surfaces. And what they measured? Voltage potentials of up to 0.95 volts. But this is lower than the energy required for seawater electrolysis, which is the process of splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen evolution reaction itself requires an input voltage of 1.23 volts, plus an overpotential of approximately 0.37 volts to split seawater. The presence of metal catalysts within the nodules, specifically manganese oxides enriched with nickel, can significantly lower the overpotentials. So the porous, defect-rich structure of the nodules could enhance this catalytic performance. The theory posits that this internal potential difference drives a current that splits seawater at the nodule surface, releasing oxygen in a process called electrolysis. The researchers also noted that the initial high rate of oxygen production might be triggered by the lander removing sediment from the nodule surfaces, exposing more electrochemically active sites. The subsequent slowdown in production could be caused by a reduction in this voltage potential or the degradation of these metal oxide catalysts. This geo-battery is an interesting, if still speculative, explanation for dark oxygen production. It suggests that nodules are part of a previously unknown chemical cycle that could be vital to ecosystems in the deep ocean. While the dark oxygen discovery is exciting, it has also faced sharp criticism from independent scientists and deep-sea mining companies. One of the most vocal critics is the deep-sea mining company that funded the research, the Metals Company, which has been granted rights to explore the CCZ for future mining prospects. Michael Clark, environmental manager at the Metals Company, said that the findings are more logically attributed to poor scientific technique and shoddy science than a never-before observed phenomenon. Clark, a marine biologist, argues that the oxygen could be explained by trapped air bubbles or leaking electricity within the deep-sea apparatus that the researchers used. Sweetman says that if the air bubbles or electrical leakage from the chamber fan regularly introduced bursts of oxygen, it would be hard to explain the several occasions when the researchers measured no production of oxygen at all. The company also cites another anomaly where one figure in the paper claims oxygen production in another nodule region, but fails to disclose that when those measurements were taken, no nodules were actually in the chamber. Sweetman concedes this point, but says that granules of manganese metal present in the sediments could have an effect similar to the nodules. Another critique came from a mining company called Adepth, released as a preprint, which sharply criticized the study as plagued by methodological flaws. The preprint from Adepth highlights issues with data collection, validation, and interpretation. Adepth's Chief Sustainability and Operations Officer focuses on the voltage measurements in the paper. Although the original paper claims that voltages in the nodules reached as high as 0.95 volts, the only evidence of this from the data is a brief blip measured on one nodule, and no other reading of any of the other 11 analyzed nodules comes anywhere close to the levels needed to split water. Sweetman responds to this by saying that electrolysis is likely to be intermittent, and just that we're saying it's possible. This critique of the research paper claims that its findings contradict all previous similar work and have ignited international debate about deep-sea minerals. The review, which states it's driven by scientific curiosity rather than financial interest, identifies significant flaws in the study's data collection, validation, and interpretation. Key issues raised include a lack of proper validation for data collection methods, the omission of crucial observations related to electrolysis process, and the unsupported voltage measurements. These problems, combined with what reviewers called unfounded hypotheses about the origins of early Earth oxygenation, lead them to question the validity of the paper's conclusions and recommend a thorough re-examination of the work. It's important to note that the peer-reviewed scientific literature has an overwhelming consensus that deep-sea ecosystems constitute an oxygen sink. Kentaro Nakamura, a geochemist at the University of Tokyo, says that there's a high possibility that the paper is wrong, because there is no sign of elevated oxygen in the waters above the nodule region. The ongoing scientific debate highlights the complexity and delicate nature of deep-sea research and the difficulty of conducting controlled experiments in such a harsh environment. To concretely determine if the nodules are producing oxygen by seawater electrolysis, Adepth mentions in its response that a simple test of measuring whether other gases are also produced is needed. If hydrogen is being produced with the oxygen, that would provide some support to the claim that electrolysis is occurring. However, if no hydrogen is measured, then there might be another mechanism at play, or the oxygen may be coming from contamination or an artifact of the methods. Adepth also mentions that the peer review process should be made public for full transparency. The controversy around dark oxygen is so heated because it sits at the intersection of a groundbreaking scientific claim and a high-stakes geopolitical race. Nations and powerful corporations are lining up for what could be a massive industrial operation miles beneath the surface. The mining industry has been quick to point out that we need these metals to transition to a green energy future. But Geiger, a co-author of the Dark Oxygen paper, points to the mining efforts in the 1980s as a cautionary tale. In 2016 and 2017, marine biologists visit sites that were mined in the 1980s and found that not even bacteria had recovered in the mined areas. In unmined regions, however, marine life flourished. Geiger says, why such dead zones persist for decades is still unknown. However, this puts a major asterisk onto the strategies for seafloor mining, as ocean floor faunal diversity in nodule-rich areas is higher than in the most diverse tropical rainforests. It would also take millions of years for these nodules to grow back, so we would be permanently destroying these ecosystems. If you're enjoying this video, please like and subscribe. I look forward to learning about new topics and creating videos each week, and your support really means a lot to me and will help me continue this work. The deep sea, with its mineral deposits, is often referred to as the last frontier. Deep sea mining advocates point to the fact that ocean mining could provide a cleaner alternative to land-based mining practices, which often leads to deforestation and water contamination in countries like Indonesia and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. However, scientists and activists warn that seabed mining could cause an irreversible chain reaction, severely harming the ocean and its ecosystems. There's also the potential for toxic metals to enter the human food chain and for the mining to reduce the urgency for research on technologies that do not rely on the precious minerals mined from the land or from the ocean. The debate over dark oxygen from polymetallic nodules is a direct challenge to the multi-billion-dollar industry poised to mine the deep ocean. The 2024 research paper claims that these metal-rich rocks are acting as geo-batteries to produce oxygen, a finding that, if true, would fundamentally alter our understanding of how life is sustained in the largest habitat on the planet. But these findings have been met with considerable skepticism, with critics pointing to alleged methodological flaws, data anomalies, and the lack of a clear, independent verification of the claims, specifically the co-production of hydrogen as a byproduct of electrolysis. The controversy highlights the complexity of deep-sea research and the high stakes of a scientific claim that could shape a new industry. The deep ocean is a world of incredible life and scientific discovery, but it's also a place of immense vulnerability. Our need for critical metals is real, but we must weigh it against continued scientific discovery and the cost to an ecosystem that operates on geological timescales.